Welcome to the Top Order podcast. The Champions Trophy is on and popping, and we're going to break down match 2 between India and Bangladesh overnight, and we'll preview the upcoming game tonight in Karachi between Afghanistan and South Africa. All that and a lot more on this special episode of the Top Order podcast covering the Champions Trophy. Seamless transition through the swish there as I reach under the bar to get to the production equipment. Morning, Raj. A big game overnight in the Champions Trophy. It is officially on and popping, and India have flexed their muscle against Bangladesh early on in the tournament.
Yeah, I was very excited to watch this game, to see India and what they put out, and they didn't disappoint. From a fast start to a rollicking start to a sort of slower end, India kind of dominated this match, I felt, all the way through. What did you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting one for India, a real opportunity for them either to avoid the banana skin that will be Bangladesh in this group, we think, but also potentially to boost their net run rate. And I want to come back to that at the back end of our coverage of this game. Let's go and have a look at the selection first, because some interesting team news for India at the top. Arshdeep Singh left out, Mohammad Shami obviously back, and they went with Kuldeep as well in their bowling lineup to give them 3 spinners. What did you make of that selection for India?
Yeah, I mean, I was very surprised. I was quite surprised by the Arshdeep Singh being left out. I was less surprised around, including that spin trio, even though they may have sort of misread this pitch a little bit, thinking that it might be a little bit faster than it was. I was always kind of expecting sort of the 3 spinners from India, but definitely Arshdeep Singh was a surprise for me. Shami, I was extremely not surprised, but impressed by how it seems like when the ICC tournament comes around, he plugs back in, and it's like he never left. And after a slow start through the England series and then the warm up, I thought that he came back very, very strong.
He is the epitome of a big tournament player, isn't he, Mohammad Shami? I mean, cometh the hour, cometh the man. Bangladesh, I think, won the toss, elected to bat. They were in all sorts of trouble by the second over. They went really hard in those first 10 overs. But what did you make of their execution in the power play?
Yeah, not great. I managed to watch the first sort of hour to 2 hours of that innings, and that's all I've seen of this game. But that Bangladesh won the toss. They came out, it seemed, with the intent to score runs quickly early. Maybe they thought that it was going to be harder to score runs as that ball got older, which was correct, yep. Or harder to score at pace anyway. So they came out trying to get a bit of a quick start. The execution was lacking. I thought the sort of the wickets they gave away early the balls weren't necessarily there to be hit. India were bowling great areas, not giving them much to hit. And then once the spin bowlers came on, Akshar came and took 2 wickets. Was it in his first over? It may have been his first over. He took those 2 wickets.
Was. And the 9th over. It was on a hat trick, and then Rohit let him down.
Yeah, and how often do you see that in cricket when you're on a great run like that? You've taken 5 wickets off the top, and then one goes down, and all of a sudden a partnership starts up. I know there were other opportunities to break that partnership, but in my mind, I feel like if that wicket had fallen in that 9th over or whatever it was, it could have been a very short night for everybody.
Absolutely. India could have iced the game at 35 for 6 inside the 10th over, and we would have been talking about India romping potentially to a 10-wicket victory inside 4 or 5 overs. That's how quick they scored in their innings. But Hridoy really anchored that Bangladesh batting innings together, scored a magnificent 100, and gave Bangladesh something to bowl at. But it proved not quite enough for them. India got off to a very, very fast start. Just before we get on to India's batting, we do have to give Shami a bit of extra praise, because I think his experience, particularly to make sure that he was consistently bowling, he was bowling from the end that allowed the batters to hit to the leg side off his bowling, which was the short boundary. So he was consistently well outside off stump, taking the pace off the ball. And I think what it showed us very early on in this Champions Trophy is that bowlers who can take the pace off and just wobble the ball about a bit and get the ball to cut into the surface and hold are going to be very, very difficult. What did you make of how India used their bowlers to play into these conditions early on in this tournament?
I think that they adapted extremely well to this. I think they thought it might be a little bit quicker, might be a little bit quicker earlier with the ball, or a little bit fresher, but it was tired the whole way through. India were going to bowl first, I believe, if they had won the toss. So everyone was doing what they wanted to do. But look, I think that being able to adapt to those situations is going to be key for India. They've got a bit of a leg up that if they do go deep into this tournament, other teams are going to be coming into conditions in a different country that they haven't played in, perhaps. Definitely into the sort of semis and finals, depending on who makes it through. I think they did a great job to adapt, and I think they will going forward as well. What did you make, before we move on to the sort of Indian batting innings, what did you make of the Sri Lanka, the Bangladeshi batting? Me and Stu yesterday talked a little bit about what did we think the fight was going to look like from a Bangladeshi perspective. With the bat, I thought they came up wanting a little bit in terms of fight. Obviously, they did get to a defendable total with some help. But what do you make of that batting innings? What would your report card be if you were sitting in the dressing rooms?
Well, I think the intent was good. The analysis was correct, but the execution was poor. I think the Bangladeshi and the Indian top order assessed the conditions pretty well, insofar as when the ball was coming onto the bat and you got a little bit of pace on the ball, it was a little bit easier to make the running than maybe later on in the game, and particularly we'll get to the Indian innings when some of their middle order got a bit stuck looking to work the ball around. I think actually Bangladesh probably overachieved in those middle overs. They were given some opportunities. I think India dropped two, maybe even three catches, missed a stumping that allowed Hridoy and Jakar Ali to get a partnership going and to give them some respectability to the scorecard. So I think, their analysis is spot on, but their execution, particularly look at Shanto, Mahedi Miraz, and Mushfiqur Rahim, who I think actually probably came in too low, batting at 6, particularly with Mahmudullah out of the side. Those guys didn't execute. Well, they all got ducks, so that's not ideal, right? But you can't win a game from 30 for 5. Which is the problem and the risk that teams take going hard in the power play. But I think the intent was right from Bangladesh, but just the execution let them down today.
I think one of the biggest points you make there is around Mushfiqur Rahim coming in at 6. We have talked about this in other series where he has come in down the order. I just think in white ball cricket, it's such a waste to have, perhaps your best batsman or one of your better batsmen definitely coming in so low in the order. I use the same argument with Glenn Phillips. I think he's coming in a little bit too far down the order. It's the same here with Mushfiqur Rahim. On this occasion, he did have a lot of time when he came in, but if things go well, he doesn't have many balls to face if he's only coming out after 30 overs or whatever that looks like. But I think that'll be a point that'll come up later in the tournament.
Yeah, and he came in with 4 partners back in the shed. So, who's he going to bat with for long periods of time to build a partnership? As it turns out, Jakar Ali was that man for Bangladesh. But I think what we've learned from the first 2 games in particular is one of your top 3, once they get in, has to go on and get a big score. And I know that, Hridoy scored 100 and Jakar Ali scored 68, but all of those guys were in before the end of the power play in this game. So, I think the pattern has to be that one of your top 3 has to get a big score and has to bat for a long period in this game, because it can be hard to get started. And I think teams that are watching on that haven't played yet might need to think about getting, okay, cool, who's my best batter? I've got to get them into the top 3 and I've got to get them in the power play when the ball's coming onto the bat, so that we can then build an innings around that person. A guy like Kane is perfect for that for New Zealand, Steve Smith for Australia. If I was England, I'd think about having Jos Buttler up there at number 3 alongside Joe Root, so that one of those guys can get in early. In fact, maybe even opening with Jos Buttler, so that one of those guys is at the top of the order and a Joe Root or a Jos Buttler is batting for a long period of time. Let's have a look at the Indian innings, because they gave us the blueprint for what we just talked about. Guys at the top of the order going hard early in the power play, and then one of them staying around and building an innings of substance to guide the team home. Other than the fact that I picked Shubman Gill to be the top run scorer in this tournament, this was a really pleasing Indian performance for me, because it gave us a blueprint for, I think, how teams need to chase as far as this tournament goes. What did you make of this Indian batting performance?
Yeah, this is Interesting way to look at this is the first 10 overs actually the easiest time to score during this tournament? If we look back at the game yesterday with Pakistan and New Zealand, Pakistan came out very, very tentatively, and they were 20 odd for two after 10. That, somewhere between there and one for 69. I think these India was at the end of the power play is probably perfect. None for 50, none for 45, somewhere around there, where you get your team off to a start and you're able to build a platform and allow the anchors through the middle just to consolidate and then explode at the end. Even 1 for 69, I'm being quite harsh there on India. I think that's a great start, a great platform for them to have started with. But the key there is, I think that they identified chasing a total, no matter what that total is, they're going to have to get off to a fast start while that ball is hard, new, and perhaps the spinners aren't bowling.
I think you're absolutely right. You have a look at the strike rates of a lot of those Indian players throughout the middle overs, Virat Kohli in particular, striking at only 60. Now, here's a guy who throughout his career has been the king of manipulating fields and keeping the scoreboard ticking along. But he only struck one boundary in his innings. He was minus 16 in terms of runs scored and balls faced. So there was a real challenge in those middle overs, getting the ball into the gaps and working it around in the field. And then you saw his dismissal trying to cut one, hit one to backward point. And then, Shreyas Iyer and Akshar pretty much just hit the ball straight up in the air, looking to force the issue. So I think there is going to be a bit of a challenge for teams to navigate those middle overs. And you really need your experienced and premier batters in those middle overs guiding the team around. You've got to give massive amount of credit to both Shubman Gill for him to anchor the innings. This was his slowest ever ODI 100. He's got 8 ODI 100s now. This was his slowest ever in terms of balls faced. And then you've got the experience of KL Rahul, which in my mind completely justified his selection in the team. I know that a lot of people are calling for Rishabh Pant, an attacking player, a left-hander to mix up that middle order for India. But you just have a look at the experience of KL Rahul to bring home and close a chase. And I think that's why he's preferred in this Indian side, because he is the guy to be able to MS Dhoni, if you like, that vital kind of pacing the chase type of situation. And India got home in the 47th over in this one, which is exactly what you want from a pacing point of view, right?
Yeah, 100%. I actually like the pace and the tempo at what they batted here. Obviously, their brilliant bowling in the first innings, allowed them to have this grace to bat at the pace that they wanted. But I actually think that this is good going forward. We look at the 2020 cricket that we play so much of now. We always seem to have an opener anchoring the innings. We wanted, that's what they wanted Virat Kohli to do, or have wanted to do definitely at IPL level, is anchor the innings from opening from opening the batting and have other batsmen sort of hit around him. Mm-hmm. That sort of went out the window here. Everyone just batted. They batted to their own tempo, and they knew that if they just were batting towards the end with wickets in hand, they would canter home. And I think that will be the case with, almost any innings that you're chasing here. If you have wickets in hand going into that last sort of 10 overs, you'll have a great chance to chase anything down. So, I think that this is, as you said, a blueprint for what teams can do going forward. Just a question on a little bit of selection. What did you make of the Indian batting lineup? With KL Rahul batting at 6, Pandya at 7, Jadeja at 8. What do you make of that?
It's a long batting lineup, isn't it? There's so much firepower in there, and Pandya and Jadeja, all they've got from this batting innings is pad rash. And I think, if this game went a little bit deeper or India had to go a little bit harder, who better to come in and try and bash it about a bit at the back end of that game. So, look, there's so much to like about this Indian side, and we've talked about their depth before. The balance that their two spin all-rounders and Hardik give them in terms of being able to bat anywhere between really 5 and 8, any of the three of them potentially, give them so many different looks, right? Akshar, the left-hander, you've got Hardik hard hitting, you've got Jadeja who can take a game away inside 20 balls. Those guys are so dangerous, and it actually allows them to play 3 spinners, which I think is going to be super important as this tournament goes forward. You mentioned it off air before we came on, and we talked about it in this pod. The spin aspect of this tournament is going to be really interesting because we've already seen the wickets being a little bit slow, ball gripping in the surface a little bit. So, guys that can bowl quick finger spin and can get the ball to grip in the surface, and potentially even Kuldeep, who can get the ball to grip because he's quite a quick leggy, can potentially be very effective. Even in the Bangladesh bowling, we saw their left arm spinner get a couple of wickets. I think it was Akshar with the ball that went across him. Rashad Hussain bowled the ball that went across the right-hander, top spinner, gripped in the surface, bounced a little bit, and, got that top edge as he looked to slog sweep. So spin is going to play an enormous part in this tournament. We can see now why India picked 5 of them in their squad. It's going to be really interesting how they fit them all in, but I think India are so well positioned in terms of that balance, and because they've got 2 spinning all-rounders that can both of them can bat, it makes their batting lineup look super dangerous. Gone are the days where you feel like, okay, if we take 4 wickets against this Indian batting lineup, then we're into the lower order. They bat so far down now, it's really not funny.
Match winners all the way down, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I really like the fact that Akshar Patel's batting at 5. I think it adds so much depth to that team. He's a genuinely could be selected just as a bowler, but not only that, he can bat in the top 5. It allows the Indians to have a keeper that bats outside the top 4, all the way down to 6. There was that stumping chance that was missed. Maybe there'll be some questions around that and whether, they've got the right keeper in the side or not. For the record, I think that at the moment they do, until KL Rahul does something poor with the gloves or with the bat. But I think that he looks really good there at number 6. Whether he needs to sort of break glass in case of emergency if there's a collapse at the top, or he needs to finish off the game at the end, him, Pandya and Jadeja are all equipped to deal with any of those situations that come up, and it's going to be very hard to get through this batting lineup. If you can get through to the sort of Rana, Shami, Kuldeep tail, it's going to be hard to get there for any bowling lineup.
Oh, you're absolutely right. He is the perfect, in case of emergency, break glass guy, isn't he? Because he can pace an innings. He's got all that experience. He can be explosive. I mean, we saw a couple of big maximums from him in this innings, but, 41 off 47 ices the chase. An absolutely perfect guy to come in that situation for India. Are there any other India things before we move on and talk about tonight's game?
I just wanted to talk about the pitch a little bit because it is going to be interesting to sort of understand what these look like throughout the tournament. Yesterday, I think we were a bit surprised by how much spin and how much bounce that pitch was in
Karachi, I think, yeah.
That pitch had in it. This one, I was probably a little bit more surprised by how sort of slow and lifeless it was. That actually, it plays a bit, if I'm looking at it, selfishly from a New Zealand perspective, that actually plays into our hands a little bit. The slower the pitches are, the lower they are, it sort of suits our batting a little bit. But we still need to get across the spin challenge that will come up. And it's going to be interesting to see how many sides are equipped to deal with, spin trios. That's what we're seeing at the at this World Cup. At this Champions Trophy so far. Teams that have spin trios have a decided edge, I think, in terms of selection so far and for the rest of the tournament.
Absolutely, and you think about New Zealand's lineup, Bracewell, Santner, and then potentially some overs from Glenn Phillips. That's where New Zealand are going to have to make things very difficult for India in the middle overs when New Zealand play India. I would be surprised, but not totally shocked if they start to consider Mark Chapman and a little bit of part-time spin from him in that India game just to change things up. But yeah, you're right. Also, spin is going to play a big part, right?
We also have the services of Rachin Ravindra if he can make it back soon as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're only a couple of days removed from, I can't remember which game it was. I think it was Oman versus USA, where it was the first ODI where it was all spin. It was 100 overs of spin effectively. in that ODI between those two countries. So, I think we're going to see spin play a big part in this Champions Trophy. Anything else on India, Bangladesh before we move on to tonight's match, which is South Africa versus Afghanistan?
No, let's move on and preview that match.
Right, let's have a look at it, because this is the beginning game in what I'm calling the Group of Death, Group B. Afghanistan are playing South Africa tonight in Karachi, so same venue that New Zealand opened the tournament against Pakistan. What do we think is going to be the big deciding factor between these two teams?
It's going to be what side, and when I say what side, I don't mean the personnel in there. What South Africa turns up. If there is a criticism of South Africa sort of over the years, is that they can be a little bit inconsistent in terms of their performance. It's sort of why I have always, as Stu loves to always take the piss out of me, I always sort of faded South Africa in these long form tournaments, because I feel the consistency is something that they struggle with. They look to be a side that's gotten over that. However, they did and generally play poor in the sort of tournament. What do we call it? The tournament that they played in with Pakistan and New Zealand. I was surprised at how they bowled in that tournament, and how they batted from a positive perspective, because I think they batted really well. But yeah, it's going to be, for me, it's going to be seeing does Hyde or Jekyll turn up? That's going to be for me, the factor I'm looking at.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of expectation on South Africa in this tournament off the back of their T20 final appearance last year, right? And they've got to break this. I don't want to call it a hoodoo, but they've got to get to a final and win one shortly. And I don't think they've got much better a chance in this tournament, because you have a look at the form of England, the form of Australia. It's patchy at the moment. There is a chance for South Africa to stamp their authority on this group. I think more than any other team, positive momentum for South Africa is a real boost for them, particularly as you have a look at how explosive their middle order can be. Stubbs, Klaasen, Miller, etc., Markram. Those guys are the engine room for South Africa. I think the challenge that they're going to have is that those guys typically come into the middle to late overs, where we've seen teams struggle so far in the tournament. I think they're going to have to go hard early, as we've seen. Afghanistan are going to bowl a lot of spin, and we've seen spin be reasonably effective. So I think there's going to be a real battle there between that South Africa middle order pacing themselves to get to the last 10, like New Zealand did. How many did New Zealand get off the last 10? Like 110, 113 off that last 10?
Yeah.
So that's going to be the key for South Africa. As you said, can they get there with wickets in hand so that those big hitters can go large at the back end of the game? If they do, I don't think Afghanistan can hang with them. But if Afghanistan can take wickets regularly through the middle overs, and they themselves get off to a fast start, their strength is in their openers, right? In Gurbat and Ibrahim. So if they can get off to a fast start, then I think it's going to bring that game back to the field. But the longer this game goes, I think the more we favour South Africa. Would you agree?
100%. If that middle to lower order of Klaasen and Miller especially, if they get in with a chance to set themselves or a platform at which they can spring off, there's no ground in the world that's big enough to sort of stop them or to hold them or any bowling attack. If they are in, they are the masters of their own destiny there. I'm excited to see what they do in this tournament. From the Afghanistan side, which we talked about there, we talked, as the innings goes on, maybe it does favour South Africa. I'm interested to see how the Afghanistan spin probable trio of Mohammad Nabi, Rashid Khan, and Noor Ahmed perform at this tournament. This is tailor-made for them. They've got hitters at the top that can help them set a platform and get to a score around 300. And then they've got these bowlers here that can just put the absolute brakes on. They've got 30 overs of really quality spin that's used to playing in the subcontinent and in big games. Afghanistan's no longer that minnow team that turns up at a tournament that is the easy beats. They are you can make a case for them going unbeaten in this tournament through to the playoff stage. So it's going to be something. But I do think that the bowlers, that Nabi, Rashid Khan, and Noor Ahmed, if he is selected, is going to be the determining factor. That's going to be where the battleground is in terms of who wins this game.
I couldn't agree more. I think Afghanistan are going to decide this group one way or another. They are going to either beat one of those teams that fancy themselves to get to the semi-finals, or they're going to win enough games that they get to the semi-finals themselves. I can't see Afghanistan not picking 3 spinners. I think they have to pick all 3 of them and bank on 30 quality overs and then find 20 overs of something to get them or to contain that South African attack. I think they have to hope that they take 5 or 6 wickets before the 35th or 36th over before South Africa really start going for home. South Africa, though, they're going to have to pick Shamsi and Maharaj, you would think, right? Unless they go for an all-out pace attack and decide that their best strategy is to put the ball into the surface and take the ball, with cutters and such to try and do that. They've got the guys who can do it, but do you think they would go with Shamsi and Maharaj, given what we've seen so far?
It'll be interesting. I'm not sure if they're playing. Are they playing on the same wicket? We don't know if they're playing on the same wicket as New Zealand.
Not 100% sure, no. Same venue, not 100% on the same wicket.
I think that they will, after seeing what has happened in the sort of rest of this tournament, they will go down that spin route. I think that most lineups we see will be playing 3 spinners if they can.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, and it doesn't stop them from then having also a guy like Bosch or Janssen providing an extra seam option. I think they'll probably end up going with at least 2 spinners. Plus, they'll obviously go with Rabada, and then they'd likely go with an all-rounder as well, even if they have Muller in there as well.
Do you think that there's likely any scars that will be carrying over from the pre-tournament tournament?
I don't think so. I think, South Africa are one of those sides I mentioned earlier. They're a real momentum team, right? They get on a roll, they get confident, particularly those batters. I think the bowlers really have to do a better job at containing sides. They conceded a lot of runs in Pakistan, and I feel like South Africa can chase just about anything on their day. But the challenge is that you don't just get an on-their-day game in this tournament. You can't really afford in this group to drop a game against a side like Afghanistan. So they're going to have to take care of business. I don't see the nerves really coming into play unless it's a semi-final or a final for South Africa. I think they would go into this group game pretty confident. I think that they can beat any team. I think they could go, right, we can beat England and Australia and Afghanistan in this group. And that should give them confidence to go into this game without a negative mindset. If they go in with a negative mindset, I think Afghanistan can trip them up, though. So it's a really delicate balance for South Africa.
And we just talked about India as having massive batting depth all the way down to 8. If South Africa are sort of 3 for not many after 10, I think that there is a real possibility that there is just an avalanche collapse. In their sort of middle to lower order. You want Clarkson's batting at 5, but you kind of want him and Miller coming in around the sort of 25 to 35 over mark. You don't want them coming in the 10th over.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the responsibility falls on Temba Bavuma, who's been batting at the top of the order, to be the guy that bats a long period of time, like Kane, like we expect Joe Root to do, and like Shubman Gill did last night for India. So I think a lot of responsibility falls on him in particular to bat a long period of time in this game. And more than any other team, I think South Africa kind of have to protect their middle order because they're so explosive, but they are not necessarily guys who are going to bat 100 balls. I might be surprised by that, and we might be proven totally wrong, but they're going to need someone to bat a long period of time in their top 3 to give their guys at their back end a chance. And we talked about going hard in the power play for India and Bangladesh in particular. I wonder if South Africa take more of a Pakistan-like approach, right? We want to be 1 for 35, 1 for 40, so that we can get 120 in the last 15 overs rather than being 30 for 3 or 30 for 5 in the power play and then having wasted all of our batting resources trying to go hard early when we could be going hard later on.
That's 100%. That's kind of where I was sort of going. I think that this batting lineup, the way it's sort of architected, they want to be 150, 180 for 3 at 30, which is actually very traditional. Kind of, if you think about it, it's very traditional for a one day innings to sort of be like that. But the difference is that they could be 150 for 3 after 30 and then be close to 400 after 50 if they execute well in the back end of that. They've got so much power there in the lower order. So yeah, very, very different kind of approach to a side like India, I think.
Absolutely, and they're constructed differently. They are constructed slightly differently. Even though India have a very powerful middle order, that's not where all of their strength lies, and that just shows how deep and how strong India are. Any more talking points before we wrap up this review of India, Bangladesh, and also previewing South Africa, Afghanistan tonight?
Nothing from me.
Well, that wraps up this episode of the Top Order podcast. The Champions Trophy coming to us thick and fast from Pakistan and the United Arab Emirates. We've covered India versus Bangladesh, a resounding win for India, or a solid win, I think we'd probably say, for India overnight. No real bonus points on offer, but India get their account opened. Tonight, Afghanistan and South Africa will be hoping to do the same in the group of death, and we'll be back in the next day or two to cover those games and more on the Champions Trophy here on the Top Order podcast. Thanks for staying with us, and we hope you enjoyed the tournament and our coverage of it. We'll see you again soon.